Most productivity books are built around one central promise. They offer a system, a framework, or a set of habits that claim to make your life more organized and efficient. But The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey takes a different approach. Instead of starting with theory, Bailey starts with experimentation. He spends a year testing productivity ideas on himself, trying to find out what actually works in real life rather than what only sounds good on paper. That approach makes this book stand out immediately. It is not written from the perspective of someone handing down rigid rules. It is written from the perspective of someone who became deeply curious about how attention, energy, time, and intention actually shape the quality of work. Bailey treats productivity like a living question. He asks what makes people effective, what makes them waste time, what helps them focus, and what causes even intelligent and motivated people to drift through their days. This makes the book feel more human and more credible. Real life is messy. Some days are focused and energetic. Some days are distracted and chaotic. Some habits work beautifully in theory but collapse under pressure. By experimenting with his own routines, Bailey shows that productivity is not just about discipline. It is about understanding yourself, your environment, your energy, and the systems around you. One of the most important ideas in the book is that productivity is not simply about doing more. It is about accomplishing what matters with less wasted attention and less unnecessary effort. That sounds simple, but it challenges the way many people think. A lot of us treat busyness as proof of value. We fill our days with motion, but motion is not the same as progress. We answer messages, attend meetings, switch between tasks, and check things off lists, yet still end the day wondering whether anything truly important moved forward. Bailey pushes against that trap. He argues that real productivity begins when you become intentional. You stop asking how to cram more into the day and start asking what deserves your best time and energy. That question shifts the whole conversation. It moves productivity away from frantic activity and toward meaningful effectiveness. This opening lesson matters because it sets the tone for everything that follows. The book is not about becoming a machine. It is about becoming more conscious. It is about designing your life and work with greater awareness. If you know where your attention goes, what drains your energy, what helps you focus, and what truly matters, you can make better decisions every day. For a YouTube audience interested in self-improvement, this is a strong starting point. The Productivity Project reminds us that productivity is not a personality trait. It is a skill built through observation, experimentation, and adjustment. You do not need a perfect life to become more effective. You need a willingness to notice what works, what fails, and what is worth changing. At its core, this book begins with a refreshing message. Productivity is not about becoming someone else. It is about understanding how to work and live better as yourself. A major lesson in the Productivity Project is that productivity should never be confused with mere efficiency. Efficiency means doing things quickly. Productivity means doing the right things well. And according to Chris Bailey, that difference is everything. Many people spend their lives getting faster at things that do not matter enough. They optimize routines, respond instantly, organize details endlessly, and keep themselves in constant motion. But if the work itself is low value, then speed alone does not help much. You just become more efficient at spending your life on the wrong targets. Bailey argues that before you think about systems, tools, or time hacks, you need clarity. You need to know what matters. Otherwise, your days will be shaped by urgency, convenience, and outside pressure. The loudest task will always win. The newest request will always feel important. And as a result, meaningful work gets crowded out by reactive work. This is why intention is such a central theme in the book. Productive people are not only people who manage time well. They are people who make deliberate choices about where their attention goes. They decide what deserves energy, what can wait, and what should be ignored completely. That sounds obvious, but it is surprisingly rare. Most people move through the day in response mode. They start with email. They jump toward notifications. They deal with small urgent issues. They tell themselves they will get to the important work later, once everything else is handled. But everything else is never fully handled. There is always one more message, one more request, one more interruption. So the important work stays postponed. Bailey's message is that you have to reverse that pattern. You have to begin by identifying high-impact tasks, the ones that actually produce meaningful results. Then you have to give those tasks your best attention before the day gets consumed by noise. This idea also changes how you think about success. A productive day is not necessarily the day when you completed the highest number of tasks. It is the day when you made progress on the things that matter most. That may mean doing fewer things, but doing them with more depth and more purpose. There is a subtle freedom in this. Once you stop measuring yourself by raw activity, you become less vulnerable to guilt and overwhelm. You no longer need to win every battle in the to-do list. You need to win the battles that count. For viewers who constantly feel busy but unsatisfied, this lesson can be transformative. Ask yourself not just what needs to be done, but what deserves to be done first. Ask which action will create the most value. Ask what future version of your life will thank you for focusing on today. That is where real productivity begins. Not with speed, not with pressure, but with intention. The moment you become intentional about where your attention goes, you stop being controlled by the day and start shaping it. One of the strongest ideas in the Productivity Project is that time management is not enough. You can organize your schedule perfectly and still have an unproductive day if your attention is scattered. Chris Bailey makes it clear that the real engine of productivity is attention. This matters because most people assume the problem is time. They say there are not enough hours, that the schedule is too full, or that they just need to become more organized. But Bailey points out that everyone gets the same 24 hours. What changes the quality of those hours is how much focused attention you bring to them. Attention is what allows you to think deeply, solve difficult problems, create meaningful work, and stay present with what matters. Without attention, even long stretches of time can be wasted. You can sit in front of your desk for hours and still accomplish very little if your mind is constantly switching, drifting, or reacting. That is why distraction is so dangerous. A quick glance at your phone may seem harmless. A few minutes checking messages may feel minor. But each interruption breaks attention. It takes the mind out of the task, forces it to reorient, and leaves behind mental residue. The more often this happens, the shallower your work becomes. Bailey emphasizes that many modern work habits are built in ways that weaken attention. Constant multitasking, open tabs, frequent notifications, and an expectation of instant responsiveness all train the brain to stay fragmented. Over time, this can make deep concentration feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. The solution is not just to work harder. The solution is to protect attention more carefully. This may mean turning off notifications, doing one task at a time, setting boundaries around email, or creating periods of uninterrupted work. These changes matter because they allow your mind to settle into the kind of concentration that produces real results. The book also highlights that attention is limited. You do not have infinite mental energy. That means you should spend your sharpest attention on the most important work, not on trivial tasks. If you waste your best hours on shallow activity, you may still be busy later, but the quality of your day will suffer. There is a powerful shift here. Instead of asking how much time a task takes, start asking how much attention it requires and whether it deserves your best attention. That question instantly makes you more selective and more strategic. For self-improvement viewers, this lesson is incredibly valuable. Time is fixed, but attention is trainable. The more you learn to direct it, guard it, and invest it wisely, the more productive and fulfilled you become. In the end, the Productivity Project teaches that productivity is not won by controlling every minute. It is won by controlling where your mind goes while those minutes are passing. That is a deeper and more useful way to think about work. Chris Bailey does not treat productivity as a purely mental challenge. He shows again and again that energy plays a huge role in what we are able to do. You may have a clear plan and enough time, but if your energy is low, your focus weakens, your patience drops, and even simple tasks start to feel heavy. This is one of the most overlooked truths in self-improvement. Many people try to fix their productivity with better apps, calendars, or lists while ignoring sleep, food, movement, and rest. Then they feel frustrated when their attention keeps slipping. But the brain does not operate independently from the body. Mental performance is deeply tied to physical condition. Bailey's experiments reinforce this clearly. He explores how sleep, exercise, diet, breaks, and workload affect concentration and output. The lesson is not that you need a perfect wellness routine. The lesson is that your productivity system has to respect human biology. When you sleep better, you think more clearly. When you move regularly, your mind feels more awake. When you take real breaks, you sustain concentration longer. When you overload yourself without recovery, performance drops, even if you are technically working more hours. This is why the book encourages readers to pay attention to energy patterns. Notice when you feel mentally strongest. Notice when you tend to drift. Notice what habits consistently improve your focus and what habits quietly ruin it. This self-awareness is important because productivity is not just about managing tasks. It is about managing the state you bring to those tasks. The book also challenges the culture of nonstop work. Many people believe that pushing harder always leads to better results. But often the opposite is true. Once energy drops too low, hours become low quality. You may still be present physically, but your mind is slower, less creative, and more vulnerable to distraction. A key insight here is that recovery is productive. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. In many cases, it is a requirement for productivity. Breaks, sleep, and space are what allow attention to renew. Without them, the mind becomes dull and reactive. For content creators, entrepreneurs, students, and knowledge workers, this lesson is critical. Your output does not depend only on how long you work. It depends on the energy behind the work. A focused hour with strong energy can be worth far more than 3 exhausted hours of shallow effort. This changes the strategy completely. Instead of trying to squeeze performance out of an empty system, you start supporting the system itself. You become more serious about rest, movement, and sustainable routines. Not because they sound healthy, but because they directly improve the quality of your work. The Productivity Project reminds us that if you want a sharper mind, you need a stronger foundation. Energy is not a side issue. It is one of the central conditions of doing meaningful work well. A recurring message throughout the Productivity Project is that important work needs depth. Chris Bailey repeatedly shows that meaningful progress usually comes from periods of concentrated, uninterrupted effort rather than from scattered bursts of activity. This matters because modern life pushes us in the opposite direction. We are encouraged to stay connected, respond quickly, and juggle many things at once. As a result, many people spend their days in shallow work. They answer messages, attend meetings, switch between tabs, and handle minor tasks. All of this can feel productive because it creates motion. But motion is not the same as depth. Deep work is different. It happens when you give a cognitively demanding task your full attention for a sustained period. Writing, strategizing, solving complex problems, learning something difficult, creating content, and making major decisions all benefit from this kind of focus. These activities often create the highest value, but they also require the most concentration. Bailey makes it clear that deep work does not happen by accident. It has to be protected. You need to decide what important task deserves your attention, create a clear block of time for it, remove distractions, and stay with it long enough for your brain to settle into the work. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. The mind is so used to novelty that concentrated effort may feel harder than it should. You may feel the urge to check something, switch tasks, or escape the moment difficulty appears. But Bailey's work shows that if you stay with the task, the discomfort often passes and the quality of focus improves. This is a powerful lesson because many people interpret early resistance as a sign that they are bad at focusing. But often, it is simply the transition period between a distracted state and a concentrated one. Deep work is not always immediately pleasant. Sometimes it starts with friction and only later becomes absorbing. Another key point is that deep work is often where real competitive advantage is built. In a world where many people are distracted, the ability to focus deeply becomes rare and valuable. The person who can think clearly, create something meaningful, and stay with hard problems longer than others has a major edge. This is especially true for a YouTube creator or anyone doing creative work. Your best ideas, strongest scripts, and most valuable output will usually not come from reactive mode. They will come from focused time where your attention is fully invested in the craft. Bailey's message is both practical and inspiring. Protect time for work that matters. Do fewer things at once. Let your mind go deeper. Because once you experience what deep concentration can produce, shallow busyness becomes much less appealing. In the end, productivity is not just about staying active. It is about making enough room for the work that actually deserves depth. And that is one of the clearest lessons this book delivers. One of the most useful qualities of the Productivity Project is that it does not depend on dramatic life overhauls. Chris Bailey shows that productivity often improves through small, practical adjustments repeated consistently over time. This is important because people often sabotage themselves by aiming for extreme change. They build complicated routines, chase perfect systems, or try to transform everything at once. For a few days, motivation is high. But then real life returns, the system becomes too heavy, and the whole effort collapses. Bailey takes a more realistic path. Since his book is built on experimentation, he constantly tests small changes and observes their effects. This creates an important lesson. The quality of a day is often shaped by small decisions that seem insignificant in the moment. Whether you check your phone first thing in the morning, whether you define your top priority before starting work, whether you take a walk, whether you leave notifications on, whether you batch shallow tasks or let them interrupt you all day, these little choices add up. That is what makes habits so powerful. They reduce friction. They turn good behavior into something easier and more automatic. A strong morning setup can protect the whole day. A simple review process can reduce chaos. A consistent deep work block can change the pace of your progress. None of these changes look dramatic on a single day, but over weeks and months they create a very different life. The book also teaches that experimentation helps you avoid copying other people blindly. What works for one person may not work for another. Some people focus best early. Others do better later. Some thrive with strict structure. Others need more flexibility. By making small adjustments and reflecting on the results, you can build a system that fits your real life instead of forcing yourself into someone else's model. This mindset is empowering because it removes pressure. You do not need the perfect routine. You need the next useful improvement. You need to notice one behavior that wastes attention and replace it with something better. Then repeat. There is also something psychologically healthy about this approach. Small changes feel manageable. They create wins. They build confidence. And confidence makes further change easier. Instead of trying to become a new person overnight, you become a slightly more intentional version of yourself again and again. For viewers who enjoy self-improvement but often feel overwhelmed by advice, this is a refreshing message. You do not need to master everything at once. You do not need a complete reinvention. Start with one habit that protects attention, one adjustment that improves energy, or one boundary that reduces distraction. Over time, those adjustments compound. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once required effort becomes routine. And that is how meaningful productivity is usually built. Not through one massive breakthrough, but through small improvements practiced consistently. The Productivity Project makes this beautifully clear. Better days are often built from better defaults. Another strength of the Productivity Project is that it does not simply give personal advice. It also quietly questions the assumptions built into modern work culture. Chris Bailey shows that many accepted habits of work are not necessarily helpful. In fact, some of them actively damage focus and effectiveness. For example, many people assume that being always available is a sign of professionalism. They answer messages instantly, keep email open all day, and interrupt themselves constantly to prove they are responsive. But Bailey's experiments suggest that this behavior often destroys concentration and reduces the quality of important work. The same is true of multitasking. In many environments, juggling many tasks is treated like a strength. But in reality, constant switching usually lowers performance. It creates mental fatigue, more mistakes, and shallower thinking. What looks efficient from the outside often feels chaotic on the inside. Then there is the broader obsession with busyness. Modern culture often rewards looking overwhelmed. Full calendars, fast replies, endless meetings, and nonstop activity can become symbols of importance. But Bailey challenges the idea that busyness equals value. Sometimes busyness is just unexamined reactivity. This is a powerful theme because it gives readers permission to rethink the defaults. Just because a behavior is common does not mean it is wise. Just because everyone else is always connected does not mean that constant connection helps you do your best work. Productivity sometimes requires going against the grain. It means creating boundaries where others expect instant access. It means protecting time for focused work when the culture celebrates visible activity. It means being willing to do fewer things at once, even if that looks slower in the short term. There is courage in this, because the shallow and reactive way of working is often socially reinforced. It gives quick signals of engagement. Deep work, reflection, and protected time may be less visible, even if they produce far better results. Bailey's book encourages a more thoughtful standard. Judge your work by value produced, not by noise generated. Judge your day by meaningful progress, not by how overwhelmed you felt. Judge your habits by whether they support attention and energy, not by whether they match the pace of the crowd. For a YouTube audience building businesses, projects, or creative careers, this lesson is especially relevant. The internet rewards constant output and constant presence, but sustainable success usually depends on better focus, better choices, and more intentional systems. The deeper message here is that working smarter is not just about tools. It is about thinking independently. It is about noticing which cultural habits are hurting you and having the discipline to replace them with better ones. That makes the Productivity Project more than just a book of tactics. It becomes an invitation to rethink what productive work should actually look like. By the end of the Productivity Project, Chris Bailey has done more than collect productivity tips. He has built a broader philosophy about attention, energy, choice, and meaningful work. The book's deepest message is that productivity is really about living more deliberately. Yes, the book helps you get more done. It offers practical lessons on focus, planning, habits, energy, and deep work. But underneath all of that is a more important question. What are you using your life for? Because productivity only matters if it helps you spend more time and energy on what truly matters. That is what gives the book its lasting value. It is not obsessed with efficiency for its own sake. It is concerned with intentionality. It asks whether your days reflect your priorities, whether your attention goes where you want it to go, and whether your work is aligned with what you care about most. This is why the book feels different from empty hustle advice. It does not say you need to be faster just to keep up. It says you need to become more aware so you can choose better. The point is not to become a productivity machine. The point is to stop wasting your energy on things that do not deserve it. There is also a sense of freedom in this perspective. Once you understand that productivity is about meaningful attention, you stop feeling pressure to do everything. You become more selective. You accept that some tasks matter far more than others. You realize that saying no, protecting focus, and respecting your energy are not selfish acts. They are part of doing better work and building a better life. Bailey's year of experimentation leads to a very human conclusion. There is no perfect system. There is no universal formula that solves every problem forever. But there is enormous power in observing yourself honestly, making thoughtful adjustments, and repeatedly bringing your attention back to what matters. For viewers, the final takeaway is simple and strong. Productivity is not about maximizing every second. It is about reducing waste, increasing clarity, and making sure your best energy goes toward the things that count. When you do that, work improves, stress often drops, and life feels more aligned. In a world full of noise, urgency, and distraction, that is a valuable skill. To know what matters. To focus on it deeply. To support your energy. To build habits that make good choices easier. And to keep experimenting until your days reflect your values more closely. The Productivity Project leaves us with a powerful reminder. Better productivity is not just about better output. It is about better living. It is about making your time, attention, and energy serve a life that feels more meaningful, more intentional, and more fully your own.